further ado, let's start with the first presentation. The first presentation is Iranian mourning mothers movement in the global era. Social activism is really a critical topic when it comes to digital world. As far as I know, lecturer Joel is with us today. Welcome to Turkey. And you have the stage. Thank you.
Yes. Me and Dr. Naman have been involved in the study. I'm a clinician at a mental health facility, and we've been working in the whole spectrum with regards to grieving mothers, particularly with regards to the Iranian movement. The purpose and discourse of this paper today delves into the analysis of Mourning Mothers campaign, which is one of the most effective digital movements in holding the Islamic regime of Iran accountable for massive violations of human rights, gender inequality, and killing of large protesters from 1981 to 2022. Drawing from inspiration from Sarah Ahmed's Cultural Politics of Emotion, embodies an alliance with the politics of the street addressed by Judith Butler. This paper scrutinizes the Iranian mourning mothers movement, shedding light on the transformative role of motherhood by everyday emotional practices as rich and complex types interwoven in struggles for social change. This study emphasizes the role of motherhood and the feelings in creating regime change and calling for solidarity by global feminists in cyberspace. Research findings show that the digitization of women life freedom movement in Iran created a new avenue for international solidarity with the Iranian mourning mothers who have been resisting state violence. Although the intensity of violence and the number of victims in the women life freedom movement were less than the Habarian event in 1981, the current uprising gained the height of international traction across European countries, the United States, and Australia. Moreover, the women life freedom movement developed a reflexivity in the body of feminist literature and united Iranian people inside and outside of Iran. Digital media are commonly perceived as a new source of empowerment for feminists and human rights activists. However, feminist scholarship has mapped how ordinary women have exclusively created an online culture to struggle against state violence, publicize the oppression of misogynistic regimes, and the call for global support. Mourning mothers are a small community and a large scattered audience who self-represent themselves through digital media and activists organize happenings and live events. This ties in with the decisive back to action as ICT's increasingly sustained movements coordinate direct action and have become instruments of direct action in their own right. Digital media is a space for audiences to foster feelings. This live dissemination leads to a vast echo in digital feminism circulating among multiple sites. As a result, the voice of a large group of indigenous mothers are heard from digital global platforms. For many years, the main discourse of modern feminism was the fight against gender inequality and women's oppression through rational strategies that excluded any type of emotional action. Such perspectives is rooted in value-based and rational instrumental social actions coined by Max Weber. According to this theory, effective actions are described as irrational and reactive. Therefore, the role of emotions in feminist politics and feminist pedagogy was denied for many years. For example, Megan Bowler argues that the feminist politic of emotion is historically grounded in the popular slogan of second wave feminism. The personal is therefore political. She highlights the role of emotions in epistemology, ethics, culture, values, and beliefs, and in the construction of social relations and hierarchies, while she often overlooks the political importance of emotion. Sarah Ahmed also investigates the cultural politics of emotion to open a dialogue between feminist pedagogies and the politics of emotion. She explores how emotions like anger, pain, love, wonder, and hope are participatory in one's identification as a feminist, as well as involvement in feminist movement. It examines how motherhood emotions mediate rather than immediate responses, and how feminism, as a response to injustice, is an emotional as well as a political and ethical response. Emphasizing the often overlooked role of motherhood in dominant Western feminist ideologies, I argue that motherhood can serve as a transformative that are assumed to form the basis of good judgment. It says the characterization of feminism as a form of anger allows the dismissal of feminist claims, even when the anger is a reasonable response to social injustice. Yet mourning mother struggles across the world were described as motivated by pure emotion rather than reason or argument, because there is an idea that confirms that feminism is not motivated by anger, an idea that accepts that motherhood's emotion is an irrational action. However, there is a specificity of anger as a political act that is addressed to somebody and seeks uptake rather than responding by claiming. For example, the Mother's Call was formulated jointly by the Palestinian movement, quote, Women of the Sun, and the Israeli movement, quote, Women Wage Peace, are very concurrent movements run by mothers based on the desire to protect the lives of children on both sides. Dismissing mothers as, quote, emotional serves to undermine and delegitimize their emotions by portraying them as irrational rather than reasonable, even when their anger may be a justified response to injustice or oppression. Such an attitude helps erase motherhood from the realm of legitimate thought and politics of feminism. This promotes patriarchal attitudes toward feminists as a means of discrediting their insight as views based on emotion rather than legitimate political discourse. Much of the literature on motherhood and emotion in creating a political movement, mothers as a political category, and transforming mourning mothers into actors call for political overthrow, paradoxically discussed outside modern feminist discourses. However, there is some evidence in Iran, Turkey, and Argentina, etc., that the resistance of mourning mothers is one of the most dynamic political movements against repressive regimes. The purpose of this article is how the resistance of mourning mothers introduced a new horizon of digital feminism regarding the impact of political power of emotion and a goal for global solidarity. Mourning mothers in Iran. Madarani Babaran are the first group of mourning mothers whose offspring were executed by the state in the 1980s. Around 4,000 political prisoners believed to be in the leftist party were brought before a three-member body known as the Death Commission and were sentenced to death. Justice seekers' mothers are divided into two groups, those whose children were killed in police custody and those whose children were killed by the regime in public incidents. Although this group has no formal structure and little documentation is available, they united as a community around 1980 to 81. Survivors of executions and families of victims would gather and routinely exchange information and support each other around the graves of their loved ones near the prisons. Mothers of Bahrain were the first to call for the release of children and warn of their possible massacre. They were also the first group who began the search for other family members and appeal to authorities. Their search resulted in the discovery of mass grave in the Bahrain cemetery between July 10th and August 6th, 1988. Mass graves would be discovered in the area throughout the rest of the year, and mothers and their supporters saw and photographed. Although mothers campaigned including public gatherings and written statements to authorities, including the UN Secretary General Javier Perez de Senor, their voice was less heard in the world. Not being heard and supported gave the regime the courage to take on more victims. Sattar Bashidi was another victim of state violence. He was a critic blogger who was murdered in custody of the Islamic Republic Security Forces in November of 2012. Balgora Ishki, mother of Sattar, established at Sattar the Hishti Foundation and made many efforts to bring his killers to justice. She brought media attention to the circumstances of her son's death and made her voice louder to the world. For the first time, a mourning mother caused a wide controversy in the ruling political system of Iran. The security services offered her financial settlement if she stayed silent. They also tried threats and warned her about the death of her daughter if she did not accept the settlement. Ishki's struggles gave her the toughness to fight for justice, despite her old age and failing health, and became a symbol of Iranian mothers' fight against state oppression. Madadari Lily is characterized as the second group whose children were killed by the Islamic regime forces in the protests following the disputed Iranian presidential election of 2009, called the Green Movement. This group of mourning mothers met every Sunday at Leia Park in Tehran, and their main demand was regime accountability for the deaths and arrests and disappearance of children. On January 9, 2010, more than 30 mourning mothers were arrested by over 100 police and plainclothes agents who violently forced the mothers into police vans. These arrests were widely condemned by human rights organizations. Finally, the mothers were released from prison on January 14, 2010. Mothers of Ukrainian flight PS-752 also lost their children tragically due to the direct fire of Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. This was January 8th, 2020. The incident occurred 5 days after the United States assassinated Qasem Soleimani, and some hours after Iran retaliated attack in which the IRGC fired dozens of ballistic missiles on American-led coalition forces. Iranian authorities initially denied having any responsibility for the aircraft's destruction, but investigations by various intelligence agencies from the Western world, as well as by the Iranian public, later revealed and was struck by 2 surface-to-air missiles. On the 11th of January 2020, the government of Iran admitted that the IRGC had targeted Flight 752 after mistakenly identifying it as an American cruise. The announcements triggered another wave of Iranian anti-government protests, parts of the larger 2019-2020 Iranian protests, calling for the removal of Ali Khamenei, leader of the Islamic regime. Mourning mothers played a very important role in these protests across the world. One of the most recent movements, Women Like Freedom movement in Iran, happened in September 2022 after the death of Mahsa Jina Amini, a young Iranian woman who was arrested by the morality police for not appropriately wearing the hijab. Shortly afterward, thousands of protesters showed up in the streets and demanded the end of the compulsory hijab laws and other forms of discrimination. However, the Iranian authorities shut down the internet and directly shot in the eyes of the protesters, killed hundreds of them, and arrested thousands more. Mourning mothers constantly use social media to gain international support and recognition and make democratic countries to put more pressure on Islamic regimes due to violations of human rights. The movement created an irreversible social resistance among those who believe women's rights to be the primary milestone for changing their future and a symbol to resist the corrupt influences of the government administration in creating poverty, insecurity, and corruption. This study seeks to address the role of emotions, motherhood, and feminist politics, and how the resistance and feelings of hatred of mothers work in the direction of regime change in Iran. It is informed by the cultural politics of emotion based on Sarah Ahmed's perspective and adaptive qualitative method, including critical discourse analysis. This article takes the opportunity to explore the political power of motherhood emotions, how hate intersects with motherhood and organizes bodies and worlds to impact social resistance. Sarah Ahmed argues hate is an effective policy that does not reside within individuals, but moves between signs and bodies. So hate circulates between actors and creates new emotions. Such circular shapes who and what became objects of hate and affect the organization of social and bodily space. This is associated with Judith Butler's understanding of the body as the space of political appearance. Quote, "It is the space of appearance in the widest sense of the word, namely the space where I appear to others as others also appear to me." The encounter between brutal regimes and mourning mothers is about the manifestation of hate through nonverbal communication and gestures that convey a sense of disgust and aversion. This encounter highlights the portrayal of hate that affects the perception and interaction of individuals. So the political consequences of hate work and circulate unconsciously in several ways. First, hate does not positively reside in the individual subject, object, or sign. Hate operates as an unconscious level and resists positive identification or location. Secondly, emotions like hate involve unconscious movements or associations between signs, figures, and objects. Feelings can take us across different levels of significance in ways that are not fully conscious. Thirdly, hate both slides or moves between different signs and figures through unconscious associations, so that certain historical associations, Renaissance, or become, quote, stuck. and encounters, even if not consciously articulated. Fourthly, hate circulates through temporal proximity between speeches and narratives getting, quote, attached to or to align with other figures through repetition with difference, even without explicit reference. Finally, hate surfaces by evoking fears, threats, and risks that cannot be consciously located in any single object or figure, allowing hate to generate effects. Therefore, hate operates unconsciously through subtle movements, associations, displacements, and circulations between signs on both conscious and unconscious levels in which mourning mothers' bodies congregate in alliance with the politics of the street. Circulation of hate between signs and body shapes who or what becomes objects of hate by creating associations and alignments that are overdetermined by historical and affective factors. The author suggests that hate does not simply reside inside of bodies, but rather circulates between them. This circulation involves movement and fixity, where some bodies tend to remain as objects of hate, while others are against them. The history of hate is bound up with the emotions in certain bodies are encountered as more hateful than others due to particular histories of association. The effective nature of hate speech allows us to understand that the effects of such encounters on the bodies of others transform them into objects of hate. Hate also surfaces in a world made up of other bodies, and how the threat posed by the bodies of others to bodily and social integrity. The circulation of hate between signs and body shapes who or what becomes objects of hate by creating intense or intimate connections and alignments that are overdetermined by historical and affective factors.
Thank you so much for your presentation and for breaking the time rule. Thank you so much. Well, we are going to get comments and questions at the end of all presentations. In the second presentation, I will skip my presentation as the last one, and we are going to continue with another topic. I would like to headline of the topic to you, from stunt actors to digital actors, deconceptualization of audiovisual performances in the era of artificial intelligence. Necati Alpçeli and Enes Aktal will present their research. It's your moment to shine.
Hi everyone, my name is Enes. I'm a PhD researcher at Üsküdar University. My current research interests are the political economy of film industry in the era of artificial intelligence. And my colleague right here, he is also the expert on technology and intellectual property. And today our topic will be from stunt actors to digital replicas. For those who might not be familiar with those words, stunt actors means doubleur in French or in Turkish, I would say, to digital replicas. Digital replicas are quite a revenue term which was coined in our new treaty following the strikes in Hollywood. Okay. How can I switch to next slide?
Could you please help us? Is there anyone who knows how can we try to please?
No.
Just no.
No, that doesn't work.
I think you tried to try this. No.
No.
I have no idea.
I think we need to exit the full screen, and then
That will work.
yeah, that's wow. Because this is PDF. Okay.
So many people like this. We can see it. So
Not really. That's the problem I have.
yes.
No, we each like
That works.
So everyone
No problem. We can see it.
Is this
Yes.
PDF?
Yeah.
That's
That's
fine.
why.
Yeah.
But I'm kind of PDF person, sorry.
We all are. Only this.
Okay, let's continue then. Our basic problematic says that the CGI has been industry standard in both Hollywood and also it's valid for the Turkish film industry. But that forces us to reconsider the creative labor and corporate reality, or the effects in French, you would say, relationship between two of these words. And not surprisingly, following the second half of the 23 was marked with WGA and SAG-AFTRA strikes, which is fueled by the screenwriters and also the screen actors in not specifically limited to LA, but also there was a huge attendance from all around the US, I would say. And this research will be basically a modest attempt to analyze how the threat of AI on audiovisual performance. These words, the audiovisual performance is not belongs to us, but coined by the SAG-AFTRA's in SAG-AFTRA's 2020 TV and theatrical agreement. So, our main aim will to delve into these strikes, on motives, the opposing parties, and the outcomes of these strikes, and a brand new glossary on audiovisual performances, SAG-AFTRA's 2020 TV theoretical agreement. The micro objectives, I would say, to basically map off the SAG-AFTRA strikes in the Hollywood studio system, starting from 1960s. I'm not deep into that. And the second one will be introduced to WICO, which is critical, which is the only supranational international organization that specifically works for the film industry and audiovisual performances. And the last one, of course, to establish a critical distance to those new concepts on AI, such as the digital replica, digital arbitration, and synthetic performer. The importance, I think that would be not quite new for US academia, but for Turkey, it's brand new to delve into those new concepts. One of the key things in this research is drawing the parallelism between the actors' unions' motivations and reactions and strikes and the emergence of ICT technologies. So, let me put it another way. In all of those strikes in the history of Hollywood studio systems, the actors' union motives was strongly against new ICT and the share of those profits. And as I said earlier, to establish a critical distance with those new glossary on TV theoretical agreement that we let's delve into the brief history of actors' union strikes in the Hollywood system. The first one is a theoretical strike. I should note that from the first time of those Hollywood strikes in Hollywood studio system, there was two main entities. The first one is the SAG, Screen Actors of Guild, and the other one is AFTRA. The SAG is basically dominated in LA, and the AFTRA is, let's say, in New York, Broadway originated. And in the first one, theoretical strike, the main problematic was the share of TV profits, the production companies and actors. Then the second one, after its first national strike, was on 1967. That again, AFTRA's main problematic was to share residuals with production companies. And then, in 1980s, SAG and AFTRA commercial strike, that was the, I think, the second joint, that was the first one to join strike, and then the second joint strike was in 1978. That was a dispute with advertising agencies and the national advertisers for better residuals on TV ads. Then in 1980s, there was a dispute following the emergence of ICT. Dispute on the contractors including profit participation for pay TV, cable TV, and video cassettes and video cassettes. Then in 1988, that was again the last step of the unresolved dispute coming from the 1980s, and again that wasn't resolved. And lastly, in 2000, SAG-AFTRA joint commercial strikes was on the new concepts of advertisement on internet or on demand, on cable TV, on connected TV, etc. So, on the latest strike on 2020, the opposing parties were at the one side SAG-AFTRA, and at the other side AMPTP, which is the Alliance of Motion Picture and Television Producers. And it's quite fair to say that that was a joint strike with Writers Guild of America, which basically a union for screenwriters in LA or in Hollywood. And quite interestingly, in the political economy of the film industry, the academics discussed that the above the line and below the line workers in this strikes, above the line means that the creative head units of those film, and below the line was basically stunt actors or other workers in film sets. All of those workers had participated in those strikes. Then, the second thing I want to add, today we are discussing that the film industry is not just labor intensive or capital intensive, but it's much more being re-encapsulated within the borders of AI. So, new emerging ICT technologies and the nature of creative labor has been changed. Lastly, I want to add for this research background is the concept of the discussion of the labor, the audiovisual labor in film industry was starting from the laboratories in material labor, going through to creative labor. All of those things, all of those key concepts in material labor, effective labor from Hart, or creative labor from David Hasbandon, was being encapsulated on the unity among place and reality of those actors. But in today's era of artificial intelligence, even not all effects or body has not belonged to us. And starting from this slide, I will give the floor to my colleague.
Thank you, Enes. Hello, everyone. I would like to continue with research background from the intellectual property organization, MICO. The Specialized Agency for the United Nations encourage creativity and innovation by administrating treaties and providing services and for global intellectual property rights protection. The second one, Rome Convention, is a part of the WIPO. The Rome Convention is an intellectual treaty that aims to protect of performance and photograph producers and broadcasting organizations. I want to tell some details about rights of performance, rights of photograph producers and broadcasting organizations. Performance, which are actors, singers, musicians, dancers, are protected against certain acts to which they have no consent, such as broadcasting and communication to the public of a live performance. Second one, producers of photographs have the right of the authorize or prohibit the direct or indirect reproduction of their photographs. And the third one, broadcasting organizations, which have the right to authorize or prohibit certain acts, namely the rebroadcasting of their broadcast. And the third one, WIPO, Performances and Photographs Convention, which are continued version of and moral rights. First of all, I want to say something about the right of reproduction. What is this mean? The right of reproduction is the right of the authorized direct or indirect reproduction of the photogram in any manner or form. The right of distribution is the right to authorize the making available to the public of the original copies of photograph through sale or other transfer or ownership. The right of rental, the right to authorize the commercial rental to the public of the original copies of the photograph. And the last one of the economic rights, the right of making available is the right to authorize the making available to public by wire or wireless means of any performance fixed in a photograph. As to unfixed live performances, the treaty grants performance. And the treaty also grants performance moralized, that is the right of the claim to be identified as the performer, and the right to the object of any distortion, mutilation, or other modification. And I want to say something about Beijing Treaty, which are same economic rights in the Beijing Treaty continue. I want to just add some two different rights. The transfer of rights and limitation and expectations. Transfer of rights, the treaty provides that contracting parties may supply in their national laws that once a performer has consented to have a visual fixation of a performance. And the second one, the limitations and expectations, Article 13 of the Beijing Treaty incorporates two so-called three-step tests to determine limitations and expectations. How can I pass the page?
I think we can use the arrow sound. Sorry, I found another message. Maybe it's better from this one.
Okay.
It's more practical. I just discovered it now.
Thank you. I want to think about the research material 2033 TV theoretical agreement. Sagafri and MATP has some negotiate about like contracts. It means pivotal contracts dealing working conditions, remunerations, and other terms of actors and performers. Agreements are periodically negotiated every few years, addressing wages, benefits, and working conditions. And it's like it's a proceeding about how can I say these kind of agreements. This agreement introduced new multi-year contracts covering television, theatrical, and streaming production. Protections for streaming performance include informed consent of AI use and prevention of sexual harassment. Members' engagement and advocacy during negotiations led to substantial employment contract. Emphasis is placed on fairness, competition, protection from AI technology abuse, and overall process in addressing member rights. The agreement is effective from 9 November 2023 and will expire 30 June 2026 following formal negotiations and commendable 7 June 2023. The research analysis types of digital replicas. A digital replica is a digital version of simulation of a physical object's environment or process. Employment-based digital replicas is a virtual representation of employees created using digital technologies such as artificial intelligence, machine learning, and natural language processing. Independently created digital replica is a virtual representation of an object, entity, environment, or even a person that is created using a digital means without relying on existing data or resources owned by another entity. Research analysis, digital alternation. Digital alternation is a process manipulating digital images or documents using computer software, like retouching, resizing, cropping, color correction, adding or removing elements. Research analysis, scientific performance. What is scientific performance? A scientific performer is a performer who is not human but rather an artificial entity such as robot and AI-generated character. It's like advanced technologies in robotics, computer graphics, artificial intelligence to mimic human-like behavior. Research, analysis, digital replication, and alternation of background actors, cost effectiveness, control of scenes, consistency, efficiency. Okay, in the conclusion, we have some parts in, which are like advantages, disadvantages, and prospective research designs of our research. How can be shaped in the future. Advantages, new emerging glossary in AI use in the current industry. Guideline for progressive supranational legislations. Third, parallelism between ICT technologies and utilization in the Hollywood system. Disadvantages, not giving detailed theoretical reference on the nature of labor in the film industry. Need more clarification about writer's stance on the future labor and AI use. And the third one, prospective research design. I want to give a speech to my colleague. Thank you.
And lastly, as a final remark, maybe I would say that prospective research design might be beneficial for the future. The first one would be the critical review of the EU AI Act, specifically introducing the amendment of a new article on audiovisual labor made in the EU. I'm not quite sure, but as I'm familiar with a little bit of those discussion on AI law, there is no specific article for audiovisual labor. The second one will be the amendments to law 50,846 on intellectual and artistic works creation of legislation in Turkey. In Turkish, let me clarify, in Turkey, I would say. And the third one, of course, maybe the most exciting one, the ethnographic research design and perception of AI use in the Turkish film industry, collected by David Oyuncular Sendikası in Turkish, or Actors Union of Turkey, or CINESEM, the collective union and last one, maybe the casting procedure, how AI might be used in casting would be great if it would be implemented. And yes, I think that would be the end of our presentation. And lastly, feeling from the SEG-AFTRA, no digital funds, we are doing.
Thank you for the lively presentation, and we are going to move on the third presentation. The title of the presentation is Give Us Our Right to Privacy, Young Adults' Perception of Digital Capitalism and Data Mining. The research coming from Cyprus, and as far as I know, Valerie is with us for presenting it. Yes, you have the stage.
social media, there are some people who are still very adamant about using social media platforms. Why? Because they fear that they may be watched, they fear that they are under surveillance, they fear that their data is being used for purposes that they do not understand, and so on and so forth. Now, because of this, we find out that digital capitalism continues to thrive in as much as we have digital platforms, we have social media platforms, digital capitalism will continue to thrive. So digital capitalism comes up as a form of, or as an extension of surveillance. Now, surveillance, in my research, I likened it to the panopticon. Now, the panopticon is like a prison setting where the prison guards watches over the prisoners, and the prisoners do not even have an idea of how much that they are being watched. So this is how I liken digital media platforms, digital capitalism, surveillance to the panopticon. Now, users also argue that whatever they post on their social media platform should be private, but there is a but with this statement. Now, if you say your social media platforms are private, however, they are on the open space and it is free for all access. Also, some people argue that they do not think that their data should be used by third parties, but then when you sign up to a social media platform, there is a point where they give you terms and conditions where you have to read and then click on I agree. Now, inside that terms and condition, there is a tiny clause. It might not be visible because I'm sure none of us have seen it or none of us have read it. But in the terms and conditions, there is a clause that states that your data can be used by third party if they can afford it. Now, a lot of people are on Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, and all of that. And while you download the platform, you do not go through terms and conditions. All you do is just scroll to the end and click on I agree. Because you just clicked on I agree, you did not see the clause where it says that your data can be used by third parties. Now, this is an argument that young adults have because they argue that these terms and conditions or this clause is hidden inside thousands and thousands of words, which is true. Because not everybody. Now, prior to starting this research, I never actually looked at terms and conditions on any media platforms. I just click on I agree because I know that if I click on I decline, you cannot use these platforms. They kick you out of the platform. Now, you have to sit down and carefully go through the platform's terms and conditions before you can find out this clause. This is how data capitalism happens. This is how it thrives. Because you give them consent, they can use your data. Now, whatever they use your data for is something that you cannot argue because you gave them the consent. Now, by virtue of using any social media platform, you have given consent to social media surveillance. Okay? Young adults are uncomfortable with social media surveillance, and it possibly affects their youth because when you tell young people that, do you know you're under surveillance because you gave consent to it, they're like, oh no, I didn't give consent. And when they say I didn't give consent, the subconscious of them now knowing that they are under surveillance makes them change the way they use their social media platforms. The reason why we are using young adults is because from October 2022 up until the end of last year, people aged 20 to 29 are the biggest users of social media. They use social media in such a way that some of them cannot live without social media. So most of them have fear of missing out, and that's why they are always on social media. This is why we selected this sample size. Now, existing literature on young adults on the issue of social media surveillance has nothing or little to do with the perception or their attitudes. Now, a lot of the research you will find is how social media surveillance affects them, how they decide to share their information, what they tend to represent about themselves online, user tolerance or privacy abuse, and all of that. Not a lot of these research has to do with their perception or their awareness of it. This is why we tend to bridge this gap, and then we are exploring or we are giving you an investigation on how young adults perceive surveillance, perceive digital capitalism, perceive data mining, and things like that. So these are findings from most of the existing research. One of the most important findings that we are going to be research question, how do young adults perceive digital capitalism and determine into this era, and what is the level of their willingness or unwillingness to participate in digital capitalism. Now, these are the few criteria we use in selecting sample size. One of them is that they had to be between the ages of 18 to 30 so that we can streamline our findings. And then at the time of conducting the interview, they had to be registered to the university. This is for ethical concerns because we already had an ethical approval and we didn't want to go outside the university borders. Now they also have to be the avid users of internet and social media platforms, and the fact that we did this was heavily hinged on the aims and objective of investigating their perception and their awareness. Now these are part of our findings. So like I said, it is a sneak peek or it's a tiny chunk of the whole of the thesis. And the findings from this research presented that young adults are very media literate. They know how to escape surveillance. They know how to deceive or manipulate the idea of social media surveillance, either by way of VPN or by creating multiple accounts that doesn't really have anything to do with their own identity. Now, the fact that they are conscious of being under surveillance, nobody likes it. Even as an older generation, most people do not like being under surveillance. So because of this, they find means of limiting social media surveillance because they tend to rely on self-surveillance. Now, self-surveillance has to do with what they post online, where they tag, if their friends tag them or something that they think is inappropriate, they tend to untag themselves almost immediately. They do not involve in conversation that has to do with something that might be of detriment to them at a later time. And also, one of the main attempts in escaping their reality is to always use VPNs. Now, VPN means that you can be in Istanbul, for example, you have another type of VPN that shows you in Cyprus. So this is one of, out of the 40 young adults we interviewed, 39 of them made use of VPNs on their phones, on their laptops, and every single device that they had. Now, due to their heavy dependency on social media, they do not want to abandon these platforms. Instead, they learn to cope with the possible dangers of surveillance by creating multiple accounts just to cheat the system. They also believe that when they do this, they deceive the algorithms, and the algorithm cannot actually identify them or what they do. Young adults would also rather stick to anonymity and pseudonymity in order to keep using these platforms. Now, one of the reasons we found out why they do not want to leave social media platforms is the fear of missing out. They do not want to miss out on whatever their peers are doing, and because of this, they rely on anonymity and pseudonymity. Now, while most of them will have real accounts, they tend to project another identity. Now, these accounts have their names, pictures, and everything that has to do with them, but they do not add their families, they do not add their teachers, they do not add their friends. They only probably use this to stop other accounts, troll other accounts, and know what's going on social media. Now, while they have strong opinion about the issue of surveillance, data mining, digital capitalism, and information capitalism, they also express their dissatisfaction in the system. They tend to start using words like, we are captives, we are prisoners, we are helpless, we do not know who is surveying us, and all of this, and this is illegal. Now, almost all the participants use the word illegal, so they think that data mining, data capitalism, information capitalism, and all of that is illegal. They use the word illegal. Now, for young adults, they believe that participating in social media surveillance is not entirely voluntary, because when you tell them that surveillance only happens because you gave them an access to your data, they tell you that I involuntarily said I accept. I didn't know what I was getting into. I just clicked I accept so that I can use these platforms. Also, consent forms are deliberately extensive, which is something as a researcher I have gone through it, and it took me 4 days to go through Facebook's user contracts and understand it. So it's one thing to read it, it's another thing to understand it. So which they are right by saying that it's deliberately extensive. And they are also not offered an alternative to protecting privacy, because when you click on I decline on social media's terms and conditions, you cannot use the platforms. The platforms are as good as useless to you. You only have to click I agree for you to continue using these platforms. Now, contrary to existing literature that opines that young adults do not have privacy concerns on social media, this is actually false. If not for anything, they are very concerned about their privacy online. They are very concerned about protecting their data. And young adults also believe that their right to privacy has been entirely taken away from them because they were not given clear and multiple options by signing into social media platforms. So in conclusion, privacy invasion is one of the terms that is constantly repeated in the interview carried out. Everybody keeps saying they are invading my privacy, they are violating my privacy. While respondents are fully aware of surveillance, data mining, and digital capitalism, they believe that there is no face to the body that carry out surveillance, and because of this, users are now subjected to putting flyers on what they post online. This means that they do not post their real identity. They tend to hide or shy away from certain things that would link them to a particular platform. Participants also stated that the use of social media was more important to them than invasion of privacy. However, they say this, but they are bothered about it. So they say, oh, I do not care, I really want to use my social media platform. Then why do you use VPN? Why do you tend to have different accounts? Young adults also generally perceive social media surveillance as the avenue for the watcher to control them by invading their privacy. However, they are enslaved to the system because they need this application. So there is no going in, and then there is no coming out. Digital capitalism and data mining can also be positive and negative. Findings from this research also indicates a weakness in privacy settings. Your privacy setting on social media doesn't actually help you. Whatever you scroll on social media, be it hiding under VPN, they can still have access to your data. Also, a participant ended the interview by saying, give us our right to privacy, this is illegal, and this participant also suggested that individual protection of privacy is the most effective way, so self-surveillance is more effective than actually logging out of the system entirely. Now, even with clear understanding of surveillance, netizens would just rather keep using their social media platforms. They do not see themselves in the nearest future, abandoning Facebook, WhatsApp, and all of that. Now, contrary to the research done by Amicha on the attitude of internet users, showing that they are likely to transfer their real-life attitudes online, this study shows something different. It shows that young adults do not transfer their real-life attitudes online, but they have resulted in building a whole new life for fear of being watched. I think, yeah, these are my references. Thank you.
Thank you, Valerie, for sharing your live study results with us. Thank you. As a last presenter, I'm going to share my presentation with you. Then we're going to get comments and questions from you. We can wait to get your comments and questions as well. Thank you again, and good afternoon again. My topic is decolonization of data and analysis on data protection practices in Turkey. Here you can see the basic mind map of my research. I know you almost know all the terms, but basically I would like to define first colonization, decolonization, and data colonization and decolonization of data. Then I would like to give some information about my research design. My method is in-depth interview, and the sampling is members of data-related civil society organizations. And I divided my findings in 3 subheadings. The first one is definition and operation of data colonization according to the sampling, what I mean the participants, and data colonialism and data decolonization practices of Turkey according to the participants. So, let me start with colonization. Almost all of us know that colonization is a practice of domination involving the subjection of one people to another. World history is full of examples of the gradual expansion of a society by observing neighboring territories and settling its people in the newly conquered lands. And our second term is decolonization. In many cases, colonialism ends through process of decolonization in which colonies gains independence from the imperial power. This process can be peaceful or involve significant struggles and conflicts as well. And when it comes to data colonization is a concept that has emerged in recent years to describe a phenomenon in which powerful entities, often from global north, extract, control, and exploit data from the global south. And our last term is, before we're going to do data decolonization, I would like to give more information about data colonization, drawing parallels with the historical colonization of the nations and the contemporary digital environment. It highlights how data has become a new form of resource colonization. And the last term, decolonization of data. Data decolonization refers to the process of challenging and correcting historical and ongoing imbalances and biases in data collection, representation, and interpretation, particularly in the context of marginalized communities and indigenous people. Here you can see the research design. My aim is discussing the data decolonization practices in Turkey with my sample. The sample is data-related civil society representatives, and methodology is indirect interview, as I mentioned. Here you can see the names of the participants and NGOs' names. I try to translate the NGOs' names in English. Maybe it sounds a little bit funny, but the first one is We Observe, and the second one is Alternative Informatics Association, and the third one is Digital Media Research Association, and the fourth one is Linux Users Association, and the last one is OpenStreetMap Turkey Community. Actually, it's an ongoing project because we have more NGOs related to data issues. So after this presentation, I will continue to conduct my in-depth interviews. So here are the first findings, I can say. The first subheadings from my in-depth interviews is definition and operation of data colonialism. Participants emphasize the following issues. Data colonization refers to the monopolization of data and emphasize significant inequality on digital platforms. The network is being destabilized in favor of big companies and big states, and certain supercenters and platforms have become data giants. And the situation has economic and political consequences. Here I have some quotes. One of them is from İFİG. He says that states say, let me keep the data under control, while the private sector says, let me make money from data. Companies are now ahead of countries and states. Data colonialism is different from physical colonialism because they actually take the data, but they do not seem to make the people completely dateless. Because they only seem to copy it, this is misleading. Because you cannot do anything unless you get complete control over the right to use of the data. And another quote from Ahmet Sabancı, perhaps the breaking point the internet environment was seen in the late 2000s when digital advertising and automated advertisements turned into an easily applicable and developable technology. Thus, the days of innocent surfing on the internet are literally gone. We are not innocent so far in the platforms. Turkey. Technology literacy, IT literacy, and cultural fact-checking could be more robust. Citizens are willing to share their data, to use digital platforms more cheaply or completely free of charge. There are more violations against the use of data by the elderly people, children, and people with disabilities. Here are some quotes about this topic. Koray Kaplıca says that we are a country with very high social media penetration. Due to the fact that we have a young and dynamic population, there is not much awareness about data security. So everyone is likely to give away their data. Using free software is not very popular in Turkey. We prefer to make our work easier. The issue of how much data we give in return is not at the forefront. And the last one is data decolonization practices of Turkey. Participants emphasize the following issues. Although there are shortcomings and issues to be discussed, the personal data protection law and the opening of offices of Facebook and other digital platforms in Turkey are important and positive developments according to the participants. The views of civil society organizations should also be taken into the account in data-related legislation. Alternative data sets from NGOs are essential for transparency. It is important to properly define critical data and open data for its beneficial use. Full transparency builds trust, not mistrust. Here are some quotes about this issue. John Lennon mentioned that we need to look at the information of what data is critical. Keeping data for the sake of national security can also be a problem. Data that has one considered critical may no longer be critical. The definition of critical data should be redefined. It is crucial to open data for its beneficial use. And the last one, Faruk Şakır and Ali Rıza Keleş both mentioned that both rights and responsibilities need to be defined in legal regulations. The responsibilities of citizens, the state, and companies should be defined and monitored. The opinions and suggestions of civil society organizations should be taken into the consideration as well. Here are my conclusions. The first one is strong civil society. Turkey has robust civil society actively engaged in personal data protection and data decolonization initiatives. The second one is technology and digital literacy. Unfortunately, enhancing technology and digital literacy across all social segments is imperative for progress. And the third one is vital legislations. Laws must evolve to meet the demands of the digital age, underlining their critical role in ensuring data protection and privacy. And the fourth one is NGO advocacy. Prior to enacting legislation, it is essential to consider and incorporate to the perspectives and demands of non-governmental organizations. And the last one is redefining data. There is pressing need to redefine concepts such as critical data, personal data, and open data to adapt to evolving technological landscapes. Thank you for your patience. We are going to Now we are going to continue with the comments and questions part. Your input is vital to our discussion, so please do not hesitate to contribute please. Who would like to start the conversation? This is your turn. Yes. Is there any question or comments? No?
I have a question.
Yeah, perfect. Please.
For both you and Valerie.
Yeah, okay.
You talked about the literacy and the education and Valerie talked about young adults data mining. How do you approach, you are both approach, digital readiness of all these participants? How shall I say? Especially for Valerie. For your participants, how do you approach their, I don't like to say level, but about the data mining process.
Okay, so you want to know how I determined their level of understanding. The reason why we chose young adults who were university students were because to some extent they will have some form of media literacy, either by being in the university system or by being avid users of social media or digital media. Now, it was easy to determine because one of the questions we asked them was how they used it and if they knew the terms. So instead of just going straight into the interviews, I started asking them questions like, have you heard about this? Have you heard about information capitalism? Have you heard about surveillance? Have you heard about data mining? And on the first go, when you ask them these questions, they give you a very distinctive response and they give you a very good, I'm saying good because to some extent they knew what it was about. So it was very easy to measure it. So I would suggest that going forward, asking really definitive questions would help you measure. So it was easy for us. And another reason too for picking them was because I wanted to use their words. Like for example, they started using things like slaves, captives. That's to tell you that they understood the extent at which surveillance and data mining went. Yeah.
Thank you. And for me, when I heard about your results, I feel really hopeful about the future because you mentioned that young generations criticize digital platforms or etc. But in general, we could say that in Turkey, people are not aware of what they share and what they get from the digital platforms. But as far as I'm concerned, as you mentioned as well, they are university students and they have a background about media literacy, IT literacy, or etc. It also shows that the importance of that kind of lessons, maybe for not for just educational purposes, but as a lifelong learning method. Maybe you need this. Yeah, thank you for your question. Any other comments or questions? So, thank you all for your participations in today's session. We have had the privilege of exploring insightful perspectives and engaging in stimulating discussions.